It was quiet for a while, and then suddenly it was not. And the
Fair
workers
enough.
outside are back to work. Welcome to the Art of AI podcast. I'm the host. Chad's the straight man, or the funny guy, smart guy. I've got some construction going on at my house right now, so if you hear that going on in the background, we're that's a long one. We're getting a new balcony put in, so yay for that. Today on the Art of AI podcast, Chad is actually going to be walking us through workflow Wednesdays. If you're unaware of what workflows are, these are kind of how things work inside of GoHighLevel, where you can automate different parts of your business. So Chad is going to show us how to use if then statements and go to statements in order to not only simplify your workflows but automate automate parts of your business that need automating, stuff like your outreach, emails that go out, responses to people clicking on different links, that type of stuff. Does that sound about right, Chad?
Sounds about right.
All right, perfect. So Chad's going to share his screen. I'm going to be here listening along and interjecting as long as you guys can hear me
Right.
over the beautiful sounds of that workflow. Chad.
All right. So let's take it here. So one of the things that I know uh, that I've seen with a lot of clients who are trying to do a little bit on their own or trying to build these workflows for other purposes, um, they have a tendency to think in a linear fashion. And what I mean by that is that I have something I want to have happen. Somebody opens, clicks a link, and I do this one thing. That one link represents, um, some data point that you want to go or send them down a workflow. And then they'll have like 50 of them, right? And so now when I'm building workflows, what I try and do is think about, not if you've got 5 options, right? 5 different tags. Let's say option A, B, C, and D. Let's say 3. It's because I don't want to go all the way to F. But A, B, C, and D. And, based on those 3 options, you want to make a change. Or maybe you have pipeline stages, right? And each pipeline stage, you want to do something with. Now, I don't create separate workflows for each pipeline stage, which happens a lot. That's what I see a lot. Oh, well, here, this pipeline stage. And then they create a folder called pipeline stages, and there's like 50 in there. And it works. But there's a couple issues with that. One, when you're creating multiple um, workflows, it's hard to lose track of which one does what, right? Even if they're all organized, you might tweak it a certain way to make sure it does X, Y, and Z a certain way. It adds a certain piece of data. But then when you're using it and you're trying to move it to workflow, you're trying to figure out, wait, how does that work? And so the if then statement, first we start with some kind of trigger, right? Um,
So
and
let's paint the picture here. So say what's the overall scenario? Like did somebody uh like this is a
we're going to
new
start with
person punch in.
somebody's clicking on a trigger link, right?
Okay.
Uh, um, and we'll just say for that, right? And then let's just say there's, we'll do another trigger link, okay? Um, called trigger link 2. We choose whatever that trigger link is, right? Um, that'll work, right? So, sorry, I'm losing my mouse here. So here's the 2 trigger links, right? Now, you could just do one workflow for each trigger link, right? But it's simpler and easier to manage long term, and that's part of it too. Is that, yeah, the single workflow for the trigger link will work, but if you're dealing with trigger links, you might as well group them all together when it makes sense. I mean, maybe you outgrow it because there is a limitation to how many triggers and how many options you can give those triggers, to where the workflow becomes cumbersome. But then I might be doing 8 to 10 trigger links per workflow instead of, 8 different workflows that do the exact same thing, right? They're effectively going to do the same thing or a similar thing, but maybe a few little additions, right? So
So this is
when we
for
got
people who have like multiple trigger links or different offers going on, something like that.
it doesn't really matter. Let's say you have, yeah, let's just say you have different offers, and you want to move them to a different workflow just based on what offer they, whatever calendar link or whatever trigger link, in this case, trigger link they use, right? What we want to do is, and then we'll say the art of AI coaching, right? And then we're going to create a workflow trigger, right? I like the workflow triggers because it allows you to use the, and I don't know when these popped in. I remember the back in the day when they didn't exist anywhere at all, but now which criteria triggers the workflow will matter, right? Like I can use that. I don't have to refilter it, because one thing that people do also is, well, if they click any trigger link, right, go ahead, do this, and then I'll filter it, right? I don't typically like to do that. I like to, unless I really have to. Typically, I'm like, okay, if this trigger gets clicked, then we're going to go do this and then use the workflow trigger as the criteria of going down path A or B, right? And there's reasons to do it one way or the other. It doesn't matter. I mean, it just, excuse me, it matters based on the, um, uh, the use case. So let me go ahead and save this, because when you click it, the one little nuance, I won't call it a bug, but the nuance of the software is once you create that trigger, you have to save it to be able to use it in the conditioning and the conditions. So
Oh,
we'll
that's
just
just
say
simply
trigger.
refreshing the list of stuff that you can use, right? Like when you save it.
Yeah, when you save it, it's basically kind of putting it in, officially executing it and refreshing it. So it's, like I said, I'm not going to call it a bug because realistically, it's just a structural thing. Um, so now you have obviously you have your two options, right? Now, and this is how I would manage some more complicated workflows where, hey, if this is happening, there's multiple options. I'm going to put all these options up there, and based on the option, let's say pipeline, if it's a no show, put it in the campaign that I use for no shows, right? And I do that in one, using the if then statement, usually in one workflow, right? Um, and the other thing that I see a lot of end users getting kind of stuck in is they keep recreating everything. Um, in other words, let's say I want both of these options to update the appointment status. I'm just picking something that doesn't, to canceled, right? That's what we're going to do, right? Um, then let's say both of these would trigger that same function. Now, this is a very simple thing, right? I could copy it across. I mean, what a lot of people will do is copy all actions from here usually, and now they both do the same thing. But here's the problem with doing that. As you get more complicated, as you're doing things that are a little more sophisticated, and you have multiple steps and maybe some if then statements within those steps, right? Like they become more complicated. That becomes a problem when you're maintaining and making tweaks to it, because as any good marketing process should have, it's going to grow, it's going to change over time, right? You're going to, you have variations, you're going to move to a slightly different messaging or something like that. And so as a habit, if everything that's happening here is the same, what I like to use is the go-to module, right? Um, and what that does is that uses that criteria, and I can just say, okay, well, if it follows this criteria, then do this and update the appointment status, right? Then I don't even need, right? I don't even need to recreate all of what it's going to do, right? I could literally build it under one pipeline or one option, and then send it over there. right, based on X, Y, and Z criteria, right? Maybe when they click on the trigger link, it updates it to the name of the product that we're trying to say that it's, and then it uses that variable in whatever copy, outreach, or whatever, right? So that may be they click on the trigger link. That trigger link represents interest in our coaching program, and and then as as the sorry, I'm spacing out here. With the coaching program, then it goes in and it does the rest of the function as it normally would. Sorry, I kind of got a little turned around there. So basically, the go-to allows you to simplify it so you're only maintaining this little area here of what needs to happen. And again, not every scenario, not every workflow is going to make a difference. Like it's not all going to need these kind of nuances, but what
Does
it does
the go-to
allow,
helps you avoid having redundant workflows built when they're very similar to each other, and you could just have it
basically,
routed to
basically, because
okay.
what'll end up happening over time as you build more workflows and then get even somewhat more complicated is you're going to find that weird things start to happen because you're now using maybe the same trigger in multiple locations. Maybe this stage does this thing in this workflow, but you do another one where when that stage happens, let's say the no-show, you put it in a no-show stage and you want to mark the no-show. And it's like, well, I mark the no-show over here, and then it adds a little something, and you have two workflows doing basic on the same trigger. So I typically organize them by trigger, right? Whatever I'm triggering the action, if I'm going to use pipeline as a trigger, then when I'm moving it, I create a pipeline workflow and all pipeline triggers as much as I can, right? Based on the limitation of the number of triggers and actions you can have across one level, will start to will be triggered, will be managed in that workflow. And then if I can't fit them all in because it's too big or cumbersome based on the way GoHighLevel works, I create a second version of it, but effectively it's the same thing. We're just slightly tweaking because they won't fit all in the same bucket, right? um, and that's basically how I would go about, you know, organizing these so you don't end up with thousands of triggers or hundreds of triggers or even tens of triggers because workflows, because those workflows will add up over time, and then trying to troubleshoot where you're going and what's doing what becomes quite difficult.
Yeah, we run into that now sometimes with just having multiple. We have all these domains, right? And then somebody will book an appointment and we'll be looking and go, well, where did this even come from? Right? Like which offer did they click on? And so this is a way that you can, especially I like the part where you said if they click on a certain link, we can then associate that link with a specific offer. And then when they're booked or whatever else happens, we have that data that's attached to that person where this is the
Correct.
offer that they were actually interested in. So when they comes time for their, discovery call or their sales appointment, then we know why they're even sitting in front of us, right?
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely one example. The most common example though is I probably should have used was the pipelines, right? Um, and what you want to do is as much as possible, whatever your the way we work it is whatever you're using as the trigger is the category that workflow deals with pipeline changes. This workflow deals with trigger clicks, right? And instead of having, well, this is the um, art of AI coaching trigger path, and if they click on this one thing, do these, right? Um, you can do a bunch of them, even if you can't fit them all in there. You're down from, if you have 20 trigger links and you can fit 10 in there, then you've got 2 workflows to handle it, not 20 workflows to handle it. That's the idea. And then the other thing is that the efficiency of managing all of those workflows, if they're doing something similar, you use the go-to and you're not even writing that part of it. You're not going through this part right here and recreating it and copying and pasting it. Because every time, for example, we use in our workflows, we use the conversational in the conversational replies and things like that. We use we call them libraries, but basically the keywords. And if they hit those keywords, then a function will happen. Well, um, we have positive and negative intent triggers. If that happens, I only put it in there once, and so those keywords become um, you know, I just point to it. Like if somebody replies, we point to it and then it has the logic built in and I don't have to recreate it 6 times or 5 times. Right. So every time I'm just saying, oh, if it's a reply, go over here and do something with it. Right. And you can do it. Doesn't matter
Right.
what function you're doing, but it makes management and troubleshooting much, much easier.
Okay, that makes sense. So let me ask you a question. I've been posting about it a little bit, and you and I kind of talk about, the stuff that we're building kind of behind the scenes. Is how much of this and your methodology in creating these workflows went into the connection with Chat GPT and using that their AI to actually book appointments and conduct cold outreach and that type of thing.
You mean how often are we leveraging Chat GPT versus
Well, no, not just
automation?
Chat GPT, but I mean, like this methodology that you've built here with this workflow. So when we're
Mhm.
dropping leads and doing our cold outreach, a lot of that is automation, and then we're relying on Chat GPT for some decision making and to have some of the conversation with the prospects, right?
Right,
How
right.
did that was that developed using the same methodology that you're using here now in these workflows, or how did that come about?
Well, it's a methodology that, so how we build this and how we build workflows slash campaigns or whatever is platform agnostic, right? So the concept and the overall general workflow doesn't have a relevance to it's not tied to one platform or another. The implementation of that workflow, and we're going to use workflow as the nomenclature, but they aren't always called workflows depending on what platform you're using, whether it's WooSender or GoHighLevel, it doesn't matter. The point is that the methodology and what we're trying to achieve is the same. The engineering and the structure of how we achieve it changes by platform. So I think what you're asking is kind of how often are we actually leveraging the AI? How often does that, and that, you know, you're there are typical patterns of behavior, and we build out our campaigns to match that. So if we're having a validation campaign, we know what we expect. We can know most of a good portion of the answers. So we don't necessarily send it to the AI. The AI is there to answer questions about the company because it's trained on what information you need for that company, right? And commonly asked questions, FAQs, that kind of stuff, where somebody can ask a question and the automation can't handle that, right? Because we can't predict everything, but the
Right.
AI handles all those wonky questions or questions about what we do or how we do it, and that's kind of um, you know how it gets managed there. When it comes to
So could the AI in that example, could it eliminate people? Because I know that a lot of times we want the conversation, right? Like we want to set an appointment for
right.
a sales call, right? But if if you needed it to, could you teach the AI how to eliminate people from that and then like maybe notify you and say, hey, this person asked this question, and so I didn't offer them an appointment after they asked that.
Yeah, I mean anything's doable. A lot of it comes down to automation, right? I mean, it's like we've said before. Um, if you need, if you don't need, if you need understanding but not compassion, you know, then you use AI, right? So if you don't need understanding, you can use automation. If you need understanding, you use AI. And if you need empathy and understanding, you can use that you need a person, right? And so the AI comes in when it needs to understand, right? Or like, for example, I've taught the AI to handle my phone died, versus my uncle died, right?
Right.
Same, all you've
That
done
was
is
I think
change
I
one
posted
word.
about that one where it was like when we were first testing it, it was like, um, oh my phone died, and it was like, I'm so sorry for your loss, right?
Right, right, right. But what
Like,
I do is I use the AI to understand the contextual difference, and then it sends the appropriate response, right? Have it send the appropriate response, and by doing that, I don't have to kind of come up with, on a chat sense, all these potential questions and answers. I focus mostly on positive and negative intent of some sort, or the categorizing phrases that might come up in that specific campaign based on how I'm sending out messages on an automated basis. Um, then I would categorize certain phrases as positive or negative. But effectively, the automation handles positive and negative internally within GoHighLevel. Um, and then otherwise, it just sends it to the AI to handle for interpretation, right?
yeah,
And the AI pushes for the appointment, right? It knows, okay, we've done this. Let's push for an appointment to talk further, right? And that's nuance that I can't necessarily, um, you can't build out into the AI, into the
right.
automation.
And we teach
Yeah.
we teach appointment setters and sales humans, right? That we don't necessarily want to be in these long back and forth text or email conversations where we're kind of allowing a prospect to kind of ask all these questions and kind of control that conversation, right? We want to be in control of the
Right.
conversation and be the one asking the questions. So the AI, while it is tuned to be able to answer some questions about the business, it's able to then redirect those questions towards an actual appointment to talk to a real person so that those questions and whatever other questions you may have can be answered, and we can figure out if the service is a good fit for you, right? And that's what we're trying to do for our customers and make it so that they're not spending as much time actually having to deal with the results of a good advertising campaign or even do manual cold outreach, and just letting the AI handle those low level conversations and interactions, and then the people who are qualified booking it straight to their calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you definitely limit the trick is to definitely limit the amount of conversation. And remember, it's a sales process. So your same sales techniques and best practices are are apply, right? And the trick is figuring out where to stop AI from just responding, because a lot of the things I see out there right now, in this space, don't necessarily have. They're just, yeah, you can talk to the bot. Well, great, but that doesn't achieve anything other than I get information, right? You still need somebody driving it to an appointment, and we have the way we've designed it. The way it's been designed is to limit the number of interactions before it just says, hey, I'd love to answer your question, but I think at this point, the best thing to do is get an appointment, and we'll be able to answer all your questions based on the information that you give me about your business, right? And um, and your needs, and specifically your desires, right? And then we get on the phone call, and you go on and do the sales process, right? I mean, and I think that's the other thing, is that, is it a support bot? Is it a sales bot? like, what are you trying to do with it? And that's another thing to think about as you're building these workflows is what is the purpose, right? What is the purpose of this particular workflow that's sending it to the AI or this particular campaign? And, you know, what is a successful result? Right. And then you just go, okay, successful result is a booked appointment, right? Or a successful result on, say, a validation campaign where we're validating the information that we have is that it's validated. That's the successful result. And then it goes over here and goes into, say, an offer, that kind of thing. You know, I mean, you can get all the questions you want to answer just by talking directly to the AI without that workflow. But, you know, it doesn't drive, you know, it doesn't really offer the, and not the entire workflow doesn't necessarily have to live in GoHighLevel. It can be external in other softwares as well. But that workflow is what determines how much the AI can talk, how much the AI, what it's allowed to say, those kind of things.
All right, cool, man. Thanks for showing us the workflows there. I'm thankful to have you because that means that I don't have to know that stuff. I'm always glad when you're like, you come in, hey, Mike, I did something cool. And I'm like, what happened? And you're like, this works. I'm awesome. I'm like, you are awesome, Chad. Let's go. So that is the Art of AI podcast for Workflow Wizards. Join us tomorrow. We're actually going to have some fun. We're going to dive into the Facebook ad library. We're going to watch some ads with you and tell you what we think. We're going to tell you which ones are legit and like really good offers and which ones maybe you should be careful about if you're looking for solutions for your business. Chad, any notes to sign off?
Nope.
He never has notes to sign off. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.